Hi everyone. I wanted to share some pointers today and delve in a little bit more closely into the topic of the nuance or the difference between compassionate witnessing and validating of our present reality, and then the more sort of encouraging and celebrating of new growth and creating a new reality, and how these can often get a little bit confused or not really looked at as important needs separately. Of course, they, in practice get interwoven, but to really just delve into that a little bit and to share 3 pointers or tips around that can maybe help you distinguish those for yourself and come to more of an attunement of what you actually really need to have those really important needs met in the way that works for you. So first, to kind of distinguish the two, the way it's sort of, the way I'm describing it is, it's like holding space for what's actually happening in the moment right now. So one way to kind of describe it or to call it is this witnessing and validating, that real kind of mirroring of this is reality right now, which is actually very, very rare and difficult to experience in ordinary life. It's something that, we want to do for our children, that many children, experience to some degree, but that many of us have not experienced in the right way or enough of, or in the right attuned way in our early years. So that is a really key thing that's lacking for so many of us, is just being witnessed as you are in your present moment experience, especially when it's a difficult one or an emotionally intense one, an overwhelming one, which for our younger selves, everything emotional is potentially very overwhelming because we haven't yet built that capacity to feel it, and I have a different video on that on YouTube. But yeah, so that's kind of one side of it, is that, and I could say much more about it, but for the purposes of just this brief overview of the two and to kind of help distinguish them a bit more and really apply them in your own life, then the other side of the coin is encouraging and celebrating new growth. It's that kind of, you can do it, you can stretch beyond what you know to date and who you've been to date, and you can try something new, you can risk trying something a little bit new, go out into the unknown. There's enough safety and stretching and leeway there for you to be able to explore and experiment and be curious to just see how it goes and kind of go into the unknown. So it's not quite, what's actually true right now in this moment. It's kind of that emergent, movement outwards and kind of moving beyond your present reality into creating a new reality. So you can kind of look at them as a spectrum, or like these 2 points on a line, and seeing where you're at in that spectrum. And I just want to say as well, that they're both really valid. And of course, there's so much more nuance to this, but if I'm kind of in this binary for this conversation, these states and these ways of being responded to and these ways of being with ourselves are both incredibly important and valuable and valid. They're totally, intrinsic parts of how we develop. They're really necessary to how we develop. So we need a balance of them at different times in our lives and across that whole spectrum. And sometimes it's like a really strong, dose of one or the other at different times. And even within the same day or within the same conversation, you might need a blend of both. So you can imagine, you ring a friend and then something challenging has happened to you. And this is all within the context, by the way, of personal growth. So change, evolution, manifesting your desires, just being a human, and kind of wanting to become more of who you really are and wanting to become a whole and integrated human. But say in everyday life, when you're having a chat with someone, I'm sure you know that difference between, those friends of yours, maybe specific people or in specific moods that they're in or modes that they're in, when there's a capacity for someone to just really kind of go, that's really crap, or that sounds really stressful, or I can see you're upset, full stop. And give that a little bit of space. It's quite a rare, skill and capacity, which is why so many of us go towards, healing spaces and therapists who are really trained to just hold space in that way. And then the difference between that and then having someone say, oh, but it's okay, and making it better, or also in a really positive way, just saying, here's something that, else you could do, or, here, that you're going to be okay in the change, and that, that you can be moving towards growth and making things different. So it really depends on where you're at and what's going on for you. And so just also to kind of, set the scene before I go into the 3 different aspects of this that are important to take note of for each of us. I will say that these are kind of experiences that we needed to have when we were younger, and they correspond to developmental stages. So you can look at them as, you know, I use the chakras system and the energy center system as a really handy framework to look at the developmental stages, and Anadea, Judith and many others have done this in an incredibly rich way. But it's like the difference between the kind of safety, you know, sort of holding steady in what's familiar and known, and just being kind of held in the present now in a more sort of static way. And then, so that would be the root chakra. It could also be your emotions in the heart chakra, but just for simplicity's sake. And then moving up into the solar plexus and the third chakra, where that I really see that as that point of emergence and kind of going out into the world and exploring. And children need to feel safe enough to do that, and adults need to feel safe enough to do that as well. So that's the kind of more the point of development where you're ideally supported to know that it's okay to try. It's okay to feel, you know, like you might get it wrong. It's okay to get it wrong. It's okay to mess it up. It's okay to be disappointed, but to explore and experiment and try. So I don't know about you, but in my own experience, I've needed a lot of the former, of the more witnessing, validating, mirroring, all of the intensity of my emotions, the losses that weren't even understood as being losses, the ordinary losses of every day, the devastating, like existential losses, you know, being a deep feeling individual and child, you know, a lot of those losses haven't really been recognized, or they get dismissed, or they're like, okay, you know, it's okay, don't be upset, move on, you know. And then that having not quite happened enough, you know, for me and for so many others, and for our parents and previous generations, imagine the unbelievable losses that they have not been supported to metabolize and digest and, you know, integrate. It means that it's kind of, it can be harder to then feel encouraged and safe enough to go and explore. And I'm not saying that they have to happen in one order or the other. It's kind of a combination of the two, because sometimes when we explore and we try and we get curious, something, you know, positive happens, and that helps us to feel safe. So just want to add that in as well. So it's not linear. These ways of being met by the world, by others, and these states, you know, within ourselves are part of being human. They're really important developmental stages, and they're important ongoing experiences to be able to give ourselves and to almost like reparent ourselves with. And there's no one right or the other. There's no like shame if you're sort of, you know, stuck at this stage or stuck at that stage, or kind of, you know, grieving and tending to wounds and really being witnessed, and you feel like you can't quite get out of the nest yet and try something new in your job or in your relationship, or, you know, you're stuck at that stage of not quite being able to explore. That's all part of being a human. So some suggestions in terms of helping yourself with this and becoming more empowered in this aspect of life, to really get yourself what you know, receive what you need in order to keep growing and evolving and becoming more of that deeper kind of, you know, in wiser, the innate you, the innate kind of energy that you have that wants to be expressed, but that has these really important needs, you know, that are so precious. To be able to meet those needs, the first thing I would suggest or share or offer you is just being able to identify what you actually need at any given time. So on a given day or any particular moment, which is tricky enough in itself to actually be able to identify, I actually just really want to be validated, and to be able to then say that to a partner, you know, or even friends, and just say in a message, look, I just really want to have a moan and have you listen. And, you know, even calling it a moan is judgmental, but in the, you know, whatever way you want to express it, but just being able to kind of express that this is what you need and identify that is huge. And then also being able to find those people who see your potential. They're not like obsessed with you changing and growing and, like, you know, in that sort of really hyper coachy way, which we see so much of in the personal development world, where it's all like, yes you can, and just mantra your way into a new iteration and timeline hop and quantum leap into the new you that was always ready, you know, and waiting. That's not really my experience of human life and growth. So it's really following the organic pace of, you know, like you would with a child, saying, okay, so try that, and then pause and see how it feels, and then try this, you know. And so finding the people who support you to do that is gold, and who support you to do that in a really kind of safe way that's also encouraging. And sometimes it's challenging, you know, sometimes it's like, okay, you've been doing that for a while now, I wonder what it would be like to move out of your comfort zone and spend a bit of your energy over here in this growth point, you know, without the judgment or the shame fest that I think can happen around a lot of this work. And so identifying what you need, and then kind of, there's two bits to it then. So the second and the third part is like seeing what you've been getting from other people, seeing what you've been Who have you been speaking to? Who do you follow online? What kind of vibe do they bring? Do they honor and, you know, validate that life is sometimes hard and that, you know, you haven't done anything wrong if you've had a challenging experience, that suffering is not something we can avoid by just, you know, having our entire life organized and controlled and planned. So people who have like that depth where they have a capacity for honoring the grief and the losses of embodied reality on this earth plane. Seeing kind of, you know, are you drawn to those kind of people, or are you drawn to the kind of more encouraging types who are really focused on growth and change? And again, no right or wrong. I'm not passing judgment here. I just know what's the right balance for me. I've come to realize that over the years, and I'm still fine-tuning that recognition and trying to kind of really shift things and sometimes course correct a little bit and realize, okay, this is what I need now. So seeing who you're following, seeing like, what have you been seeking out from others? What have you been actually asking for, almost consciously or unconsciously? And what have you been getting back? Have you been constantly told that you're somehow stuck, or you're wallowing in it? Or, you know, are you being told that like you shouldn't be dwelling on your feelings and you need to kind of do something about this now? Does that feel premature? You know, are you maybe replaying an experience of not being met in your particular needs? Sometimes you just need that witnessing and validating for longer. Sometimes you need it for a few weeks, a few months, a few years. Sometimes we need to have these depressive or these stuck modes for a long time to really sort of say no and sense into what's needed, you know? So see what you are, whether you're getting your needs met in that or not with others, and then being able to start communicating it clearly to others. So practicing, once you've identified what you need at this time, which I'm not saying is always possible, but it's that's a real practice of turning inwards as well. And then seeing kind of what your dynamic is, what you tend to do with others, because that's often where we go first. So that's why I'm focusing on this so much now, because we tend to kind of, looking at your relationships and your patterns helps you have a really good insight into how you relate to yourself as well. Communicating it to others and then practicing receiving it. So seeing, can you let that in when you're being witnessed, or do you tend to kind of close off your energy and go off towards those people who keep telling you you need to be somebody different? Are you replaying the wound of not being met in your actual needs? Which again, we do. That's what we do. We keep trying to, you know, trying to get people to meet our needs, but sometimes we look in the wrong place. And then so thirdly, it's coming back to giving it to yourself. So it's developing that muscle and that habit of letting it become the new normal, that you do pause and witness yourself when something is needing it. And, you know, that you kind of, in any way, attune inwards. Sometimes it's more of a big, like, pause and stop and hold on. I need to, like, book some time to do this, whether it's through a class or a meditation or something, or just, like, in your bathroom or when you're in your kitchen, you know, doing something to kind of really come back home into yourself and have that self-compassion to be able to say, oh, you're suffering, I witness you. You know, whatever way you want to put it. I don't necessarily word it that way myself, but like just that softening of loving, seeing, validating, naming, really validating, like, oh, this is what I'm feeling right now. And kind of full stop, you know, for a time. We go straight to the solution, straight to, oh, here's what you need to do to fix it. But we really need that moment of, oh, that's hard, or oh, you just got, you know, shame, a wash of shame there, or you felt rejected by that person. Oh, that's what's happening. I see you, I hear you, you know, I sense you. And then being able to also, like, letting that become more of a normal way of being with yourself, and then also being able to gradually build that muscle of also offering yourself the other part of it, which is the celebrating and the, like, kind of encouraging the growth side of things and becoming your own inner champion, your inner cheerleader, you know, in a way that feels really authentic to you, and saying, yay, look what you did, you know, celebrating that, like really encouraging that, like you would with a child. We can do it so much more easily often with other children, you know, but with our own inner child who is alive and well inside all of us, it can feel very, very, very painful to do and really weird, because we encounter the wounded parts of ourselves, of course. So it is a real gradual process, you know. So just to finish, I will say that it's not something that you kind of just do a few times and then you feel like, oh, I've got this now. It's a real ongoing, lifelong commitment to keep promises to yourself, build that trusting relationship, and strengthen your inner confidence and power. Like, to me, this is how we strengthen our confidence and power. It's by becoming trusted you know, witnesses and encouragers of ourselves, and not always kind of seeking outside like exclusively, that really helps us to receive it as well. And it's like a kind of a bit of a chicken and egg thing. Like it does both sides of that bolster each other. It helps when you receive it from others a bit, and then it helps when you give it to yourself, and then you like practice feeling into like, oh, you know, that person seems to think I'm worthy enough of receiving this witnessing and validation, and like they see enough in me to encourage me into who I know I can be, but I'm not quite there yet. And it can be small things that you're trying as well. It doesn't have to be like, you know, the big reveal of you in your regal, you know, total 3.0 iteration. It's just like trying a new thing. So building that new muscle over time. And all of this really helps to build those inner foundations of, yeah, like strengthening your self-agency, your character, like what people call your character, and that kind of feedback loop where you build your will and you're able to follow through. So that's almost like the third point of this. So there's a line, you know, there's going between the witnessing and then the encouraging growth, and then kind of moving that into, it's almost like a pyramid of when you can kind of have that as a foundation, then you can go forth and move up and onwards, you know, and kind of coalesce into taking action or following through with what you said you would, and building that feedback loop of kind of feeling like you're following through, you know, you're basically like following through, and you're keeping your promises to yourself by living in that energy of, okay, I said I would do this, so I'm going to do that, you know, I'm going to live in this new way that actually corresponds to what I need and is actually honouring, not bulldozing over my inner needs, but is very much honouring of those. So that is such a beautiful way to heal all of the ways that we've not been attuned to create this sort of mirror and this like feedback and the kind of self-parenting, reparenting, and that strengthening of the self. So that's what I wanted to offer you today. I'd love to hear if any of this resonates. I know I was asking in the Inner Oracle Sanctuary group here, the Facebook group, and people were saying that they need both. And, you know, I know speaking to people, and one person said the first part was important, like the witnessing and validating. And I do think that part is very much under received and underdone, or being, like there's not so much of that being mode in the world of healing and growth and personal development. So that's very much also what happens in say more psychotherapy and counselling. But I think that it can also, you know, the missing bit in that world can also be encouraging the new and being a little bit more challenging. So we kind of, you know, that can be brought in no matter what the modality or the process is. So it's really about coming back to you and seeing what you need and kind of who feels like a good match for that. And then, as I said, watching out for when you're actually replaying an old wounded way of not quite being met, you know, and you're being received in a way that doesn't feel like it's honouring of what you need. Because when you do honour what you need, it's such a different experience. It's such a beautiful growth that can happen from that, and this flourishing, you know, really comes from these very fundamental, basic, like, you know, psychological and emotional foundations. It's worth spending time on these, because what happens then is you get to go forth and be a beautiful, you know, functioning adult while having this very intimate, loving relationship with yourself as a foundation for all of your life. So yeah, I would love to hear what you think of these different states and what your experience has been with them. I'll be back in sharing a little bit more about these core foundations that allow us to feel secure and safe to go forth and flourish. Alright, that's it for now. Bye.